Whispers of the Churail. That phrase alone should make your spirit pay attention. Because there are voices that don't shout, they whisper. And those whispers are more dangerous than screams. You see, the enemy never starts with a roar. He starts with a whisper in the dark. The Churail doesn't appear first in your dreams. She begins in your decisions. The whispers of the Churail are not just old folk tales. They are spiritual symbols of how darkness seduces the soul, how fear disguises itself as fascination, and how curiosity becomes a doorway. What you listen to can either shape your destiny or destroy it. And when you listen to the wrong voice, you give permission to the wrong spirit. You see, the Churail never comes screaming. Darkness never announces itself with thunder and lightning. It comes softly, gently, in the form of a whisper. It's that subtle thought, that small temptation, that unguarded moment of curiosity that begins the fall. The Churail's whisper is never loud because she knows she doesn't need volume, she needs your attention. Her power is not in what she says, but in how she makes you feel when she says it. She disguises the dark in something that seems deep. She hides corruption in curiosity. She makes danger look desirable. Every spiritual downfall begins with a whisper, a thought that says, "What if?" or "just once won't hurt." That's how she begins her conversation. And she doesn't whisper into your ear, she whispers into your desire. She studies your weakness before she speaks your language. She knows the tone that your curiosity responds to. The Churail doesn't break your door. She waits until you open it yourself. She whispers just enough to make you lean closer. And that leaning is where your loss begins. You see, curiosity is a spiritual gate. What you're curious about reveals what your spirit is hungry for. When you start entertaining forbidden knowledge, dark fantasies, secret attractions, you are not just exploring ideas, you're opening gates. The Churail thrives at those gates. She doesn't force her way in, she's invited in by interest. She waits for your attention like a parasite waits for a wound. Some of you are fighting battles you never should have been in. Not because the Churail was stronger, but because you listened longer than you should have. You thought you were just being open-minded, just exploring, just curious, and that's when her whisper became your warfare. The Churail knows that the mind is the gatekeeper of the spirit. If she can get your mind, she can affect your mood. If she can affect your mood, she can influence your decisions. And if she can influence your decisions, she can shape your destiny. She doesn't fight with weapons, she fights with words. She doesn't come with chains, she comes with conversation. That's why so many people are bound not by demons they see, but by whispers they've believed. The Churail doesn't have to possess your body if she can possess your belief. Her whispers are subtle. You're not enough. You need more. They don't see your value. Try this, it'll make you feel better. And slowly, those whispers start forming roots in your emotions. The moment you start reasoning with her, you've already lost ground. Because you cannot debate with deception, you must discern it. The Churail whispers when your guard is down, when you're tired, lonely, angry, or offended. She waits for emotional weakness to become spiritual entry. That's why discernment is not about what you hear, it's about who you're hearing from. Many people have allowed the Churail to speak through their emotions, and they thought it was intuition. But every whisper that leads you away from peace is not wisdom, it's a warning. You must learn to close the door quickly. Curiosity must never be greater than conviction, because the Churail doesn't need much, she just needs a moment of your interest. And once she gets it, she builds a home in your hesitation. So guard your gates. Don't let every whisper find a welcome. Don't let every thought find a throne. Because the Churail only has power where curiosity opens doors. When you master the art of silence towards seduction, you disarm the whisper before it grows into a war. The Churail cannot whisper where the spirit has filled. When your mind is renewed, the whisper loses its way. When your spirit is alert, curiosity bows to conviction. The Churail cannot enter where faith is on guard. So when she whispers next time, don't argue. Don't explain, don't entertain. Just close the door. Because the Churail doesn't knock, she whispers, waiting for curiosity to open the door. Every whisper has an agenda. No voice is ever neutral. Nothing in the realm of the spirit is casual. Every sound that reaches your ears is either building your faith or breaking your focus. Every voice carries a spirit behind it. That is why you must never underestimate the whispers that surround you. The Churail's power doesn't come from her volume. It comes from her intention. Her whispers are not random words, they are assignments. They are coded messages designed to shift your thoughts, confuse your discernment, and weaken your will. She doesn't need to shout, because she's not trying to scare you. She's trying to seduce you. She wants to sound like your own thoughts, so you mistake deception for discernment. The Churail's whisper is not always dark at first. Sometimes it comes as comfort. It sounds like the voice of reason, the tone of understanding, the feeling of relief. She will whisper things that make sense to your emotions, but make war against your spirit. She will tell you to protect your peace, when what she really means is or run from correction. She will tell you to follow your heart, when your heart has already been influenced by her lies. She will tell you that you deserve better, when she's the one planting discontent inside you. Every whisper carries an assignment, and her assignment is to redirect your attention from destiny to distraction. This is how spiritual deception works. It doesn't always sound like evil, it often sounds like empathy. It doesn't always look like darkness, sometimes it looks like light that's slightly dimmed. That's why discernment is not just about recognizing the wrong. It's about identifying what is almost right. The Churail knows you will never follow outright lies, so she sprinkles just enough truth to make the lie believable. She hides poison in passion, darkness in desire, confusion in comfort. You don't notice the shift immediately. It happens slowly, through whispers that sound too familiar to question. When you don't discern the agenda behind a voice, you'll start trusting the wrong tune. You'll start feeling drawn to things that feed your emotions but starve your spirit. You'll begin to confuse sympathy with safety, attention with affection, and curiosity with calling. The Churail knows that once she gets your agreement, she doesn't need your awareness. She thrives in your unguarded moments. Her whispers are subtle manipulations that sound like revelations. She's not trying to frighten you, she's trying to familiarize herself with you. Because if she can sound familiar, you'll stop resisting her. Every whisper in your life is either pulling you closer to your purpose or pushing you closer to your pit. That's why silence before the wrong voice is more powerful than response. You must learn to ask yourself, who benefits from what I'm hearing? Does this voice bring peace or pressure? Does it awaken my spirit or agitate my soul? Because the Churail will always make the wrong thing feel urgent and the right thing feel optional. She'll whisper, "You need it now. You deserve this." No one will know. Her goal is to create emotional noise until your spiritual sense becomes numb. But here's the danger: when you entertain too many voices, your spirit loses the sound of truth. You start doubting what's real and chasing what's comfortable. That's why confusion is never a sign of divine instruction. It's the evidence of demonic interference. The Churail uses confusion as camouflage. She wants to make you question your conviction. She wants to drown truth in too much talking. She knows that if she can make you double-minded, she can make you powerless. Because faith doesn't function in confusion, it functions in clarity. Every whisper that comes into your life must be tested. Not through emotion, but through alignment. Does it align with peace? Does it align with purity? Does it align with purpose? If not, reject it. Don't wrestle with it, reject it. Because when you tolerate wrong voices, you give them authority to shape your reality. The Churail's agenda is not just to speak, it's to be heard. The moment you start listening, her influence begins. The moment you start reasoning with her, her roots begin to grow. Understand this: you are a gate. Every word that enters your life is a seed. Some seeds bear truth, others bear torment. The Churail knows she can't curse what God has blessed, so she whispers to make you misuse your blessing. She can't close your door, but she can make you unlock it. That's why you must never entertain voices that don't match your assignment. Every whisper that doesn't confirm your calling is a counterfeit designed to delay it. There's a reason she whispers, because she knows the power of suggestion. She knows that if she can suggest the thought, you will create the feeling. And if she can control the feeling, she can influence the choice. That's the strategy, subtle suggestion that births self-destruction. The Churail never says, "I'll destroy you." She says, "Think about it." And the moment you start thinking, she starts working. So close your ears to everything that doesn't feed your spirit. Not every soft voice deserves your silence. Some whispers are not from wisdom, they're from warfare. The Churail's whispers are not seeking your attention, they're seeking your agreement. And once you agree, she doesn't have to whisper anymore, because now her voice sounds like yours. When fear becomes fascination, your spirit starts drifting from discernment. That's the danger the Churail depends on. She doesn't want to scare you, she wants to interest you. Because the moment you become fascinated by what you should be fleeing from, she's already winning. The Churail knows that curiosity is the most subtle form of permission. She understands that the human spirit can be drawn to darkness, not because it loves evil, but because it loves mystery. So she cloaks her corruption in curiosity and her filth in fascination. She will never appear as something terrifying, she will appear as something intriguing. This is how fear becomes fascination. You start by rejecting it, but then you start reasoning with it. You say, "Let me just understand it. Let me just look deeper." That's how she whispers you closer. She feeds off the energy of your interest. And what was once repulsive starts to look fascinating. The thing that used to terrify you becomes something you want to explore. That's how the Churail transforms from an enemy into entertainment. The moment you start getting comfortable with what used to convict you, the spiritual shift has already started. Fear has a way of hiding behind fascination. You see something dark, but instead of rebuking it, you analyze it. You begin watching, listening, reading, not realizing you're slowly becoming emotionally invested in the very thing that once made you uneasy. That's how the Churail plants her seed. She doesn't rush you, she lets you get familiar. She lets you study her. She allows you to think you're in control, but all along, she's studying your response. Every time you pause a little longer, every time you listen a little closer, she takes note. Fascination is her invitation. The Churail knows she can't dominate a discerning spirit, so she distracts it instead. The moment your focus shifts from discernment to fascination, she begins her deception. Because discernment requires distance, you can't discern what you're too close to. When fascination pulls you in, you lose your ability to see clearly. You begin interpreting danger as depth. You call confusion curiosity. And you start labeling evil as interesting. That's when your spirit begins to drift slowly but surely away from conviction. You must understand that fascination is a trap disguised as insight. The Churail uses fascination to break your rhythm of resistance. She wants your spirit to grow numb to warning signs. She doesn't silence your discernment in one moment. She numbs it over time. It's like a flame that doesn't go out immediately but flickers until it fades. The Churail's power lies in subtle erosion. She whispers long enough for your fear to turn into familiarity. And once something becomes familiar, it no longer feels dangerous. That's how many people open spiritual gates without realizing it. They become fascinated by things they should have fled from: dark media, strange energies, forbidden knowledge, manipulative people. They think they're just exploring, but in truth, they're being exposed. Exposure without discernment is always dangerous. Every image you watch, every sound you listen to, every emotion you entertain carries a frequency. The Churail rides on those frequencies. She doesn't need permission when your curiosity provides access. When fear becomes fascination, it's not that the Churail becomes stronger, it's that your resistance becomes weaker. You begin rationalizing instead of rebuking. You start managing the darkness instead of mastering it. You tell yourself, "It's not that serious," or "I can handle it." But spiritual warfare doesn't respond to self-confidence. It responds to spiritual conviction. The Churail thrives on the overconfident, those who believe they can handle the whisper. But no one ever conquers what they keep entertaining. Fascination blurs boundaries. It convinces you that you can get close to the edge without falling. But the moment you lose focus, gravity takes over. The Churail knows that your fall doesn't have to be dramatic, it just has to be gradual. She wants your interest to grow slowly until it becomes obsession. Because fascination always ends in fixation. And once you're fixated, you no longer question, you surrender. That's why the Churail uses beauty as bait. She makes darkness look divine. She makes deception look deep. She'll whisper through visuals, through voices, through atmospheres that appeal to your senses but assault your spirit. She makes you feel awakened, while she's actually leading you into a trance. And the more fascinated you become, the less you remember what truth feels like. Fear used to make you pray. Now fascination makes you pause. Fear used to send you running to light. Now fascination keeps you lingering in the dark. That's how your discernment drifts, not in rebellion, but in curiosity. And the Churail waits for that drift. She doesn't mind your prayers as long as she can have your attention. She knows that the more curious you are, the less cautious you'll be. So guard your curiosity. Protect your gaze. Every fascination that doesn't lead you closer to truth is an invisible chain leading you deeper into deception. The Churail doesn't need to shout when she can sparkle. She doesn't need to fight when fascination does her work. The Churail feeds on broken attention. She lives where your spirit is distracted. That is her atmosphere, her dwelling place, her feeding ground. She doesn't need chaos to attack you. She only needs your focus to be fragmented. Because when your attention is divided, your discernment weakens. She waits for that moment when your mind is busy but your spirit is silent. She waits for that gap when your heart is overwhelmed, your emotions are scattered, and your thoughts are unguarded. That's where she whispers. That's where she breathes. That's where she begins to work. The Churail doesn't need a temple to dwell in. She builds one out of your distractions. Every time you lose focus, every time your spiritual rhythm breaks, every time you start something but don't finish it, she feeds. Because distraction is the starvation of destiny. It's not that she's stronger than you. It's that you stopped watching. The Churail doesn't overpower alert spirits. She waits for tired ones. She waits for the moment you get weary of doing good, weary of praying, weary of discerning. She's patient. She doesn't mind waiting years if it means getting a distracted version of you. She knows she can't stop your purpose, so she confuses your priorities. She can't destroy your destiny, so she dilutes your focus. She'll let you stay busy as long as you're not productive. She'll let you stay spiritual as long as you're not sharp. Because a distracted believer is a defeated believer. You don't have to lose your faith to lose your fire. You just have to lose your focus. That's how she wins, not through fear, but through fatigue. She wants you scrolling when you should be seeking. She wants you complaining when you should be commanding. She wants your attention, not your worship, because your attention determines your altar. Distraction is not just about time, it's about energy. Every moment you give to something that doesn't build your spirit weakens your discernment. That's why the Churail keeps you emotionally busy. She fills your schedule but empties your soul. She'll make sure you're surrounded by noise, opinions, conversations, arguments, entertainment, so that you never sit still long enough to hear the truth. She thrives in environments where silence is uncomfortable, because silence is where the Spirit speaks. And if she can keep you distracted, she can keep you deaf. There are some people who are not possessed, but they are preoccupied. Their minds are constantly occupied with worry, fear, offense, and comparison. And the Churail doesn't need to enter them. She just keeps whispering until they're exhausted. Her food is your attention. She feeds off every glance, every click, every thought you give to things that don't matter. She grows stronger as your focus grows weaker. You see, broken attention is not always caused by bad things, it's often caused by too many good things. The Churail loves when you're busy doing everything except the one thing that matters. She loves when you pray but don't listen, when you speak but don't understand, when you work hard but without purpose. Because she knows that distraction disguised as duty is still destruction. If she can't stop your progress, she'll scatter your passion. She'll stretch you thin with things that seem right, but lead nowhere. That's why discernment is not just about knowing what's wrong. It's about knowing what's right for now. You can't fight spiritual battles if your attention is broken into pieces. Every piece of your focus that's misplaced becomes a feeding spot for her. The Churail doesn't enter through possession, she enters through preoccupation. When your attention is fragmented, she builds strongholds in your thoughts. She'll make you remember pain more than purpose. She'll replay past wounds until they drain your present strength. She'll keep you thinking about people who've left instead of the God who's still there. The Churail doesn't care if you read the word as long as you can't retain it. She doesn't care if you hear truth as long as you don't focus on it. Because the power of truth is not in hearing, it's in holding. Every time truth passes through your mind without staying, the Churail feeds. That's why she'll do anything to break your attention when revelation starts to rise. Your phone rings, your mind drifts. Your emotions stir, she uses all of it to keep your spirit from locking in. She knows that what you don't focus on, you can't receive. She lives in the cracks of your concentration. That's why she loves when you live in constant hurry, when you move from one thing to another, when your day is full but your soul is empty. The Churail thrives in confusion and chaos. She doesn't need to destroy your life. She just needs to make it noisy enough that you can't hear your calling anymore. And once you stop hearing your calling, you start drifting through life, present in the body, absent in the spirit. When your attention is broken, your authority is broken. Because authority flows through alignment, and alignment requires focus. The Churail knows that the moment you take your eyes off purpose, she becomes the loudest voice in your head. So guard your focus. Protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. Her whispers sound like comfort but carry a curse. That's how she deceives the soul through the illusion of relief. The Churail doesn't always come to frighten you. Sometimes she comes to comfort you. She knows that the human heart longs for peace, and she imitates it. She knows you crave reassurance, so she provides it, but it's poisoned. Her voice doesn't sound like chaos, it sounds like calm. Her presence doesn't feel heavy, it feels healing at first. And that's what makes her dangerous, because the Churail knows that comfort without conviction leads to captivity. She doesn't show up to fight, she shows up to soothe. She whispers when you're hurt. She approaches when you're lonely. She speaks when you're tired of waiting. Her tone is soft, almost nurturing. She tells you what you want to hear, not what you need to face. That's how her curse begins, through counterfeit comfort. She gives you permission to stay in pain. She validates your wounds so you never seek true healing. She'll whisper, "It's okay to feel this way," but never remind you, "It's not okay to stay this way." Her comfort keeps you comfortable in dysfunction. The Churail's curse is not always obvious. It's not a sudden darkness, it's a slow numbing. You start to lose your urgency. You stop fighting the things you once resisted. Her whisper starts to sound like wisdom, because it agrees with your emotions. She'll say, "You've done enough." She'll say, "Don't worry about it anymore." She'll say, "You deserve to rest," when what she really means is, "You deserve to stop growing." She knows that if she can make you feel safe in stagnation, she can stop your transformation. That's why so many lose their discernment in seasons of comfort. The Churail loves comfort zones, because that's where conviction dies quietly. She waits for you to mistake temporary relief for spiritual peace. There's a difference between rest and retreat, but her whispers blur that line. Her voice will calm your emotions but corrupt your endurance. She makes you feel better while making you weaker. You'll feel lighter, but you'll also feel less driven. You'll feel soothed, but you'll also lose your strength to stand. She whispers to your wounds, and if you're not careful, you'll start worshiping her for understanding you. You'll think she's helping you heal, when she's really helping you hide. Because her goal isn't to fix what's broken, it's to keep it broken without the pain. She makes brokenness feel bearable. That's the curse. You stop noticing how far you've drifted because her comfort cushions your decline. She whispers, "You don't need to forgive, you just need to move on." And that whisper feels freeing until the bitterness becomes your companion. She whispers, "You don't have to change, they were the problem." And that whisper feels empowering until pride becomes your prison. She whispers, "You don't need to try again, you've done enough." And that whisper feels peaceful until regret fills the silence later. Every comforting whisper from the Churail carries a hidden curse that grows in the soil of your surrender. Her whispers have one mission: to replace the voice of truth. She wants to sound so close to comfort that you stop listening for correction. She wants you to confuse the feeling of calm with the presence of peace. But peace doesn't always feel comfortable. True peace confronts before it comforts. It exposes before it soothes. The Churail offers the opposite: she comforts before she corrupts. And when she finishes whispering, she leaves you numb. That's why spiritual discernment is not about how something makes you feel, but what it does to your focus. Anything that comforts you but disconnects you from truth is carrying a curse. Because the Churail's comfort is a counterfeit. It doesn't heal, it hides. She makes you believe that silence means safety, that inactivity means stability, that escape means deliverance. But what she really wants is your agreement. Once you agree with her version of comfort, you start rejecting real correction. The Churail doesn't curse you with spells, she curses you with stillness. She doesn't trap you with chains, she traps you with contentment. You start believing that this is as far as you can go, as much as you can handle, as close as you can get. Her comfort kills your hunger for more. And when you stop hungering, your spirit starts dying. She knows that if she can keep you emotionally soothed, she can keep you spiritually asleep. Her whispers are not meant to scare you, they're meant to settle you in the wrong season. You'll start to think, maybe I'm fine here, maybe this is enough. That's her goal: to make you mistake delay for destiny, to make you rest in the middle of your race, to make you believe that peace means pause. She whispers like comfort, but her touch carries the coldness of delay. She smiles with warmth, but her shadow freezes your future. You think you're healing, but you're halting. You think you're recovering, but you're retreating. Her comfort is a curse dressed in compassion. You can't cast out what you've entertained for too long. That's the truth most people don't want to face. You cannot drive out a spirit that has found comfort in your presence. You cannot rebuke what you have built relationship with. You cannot evict what you've been feeding. The Churail doesn't need to fight for space when you've already given her a seat. She doesn't force her way into your atmosphere. She waits for the invitation that comes through tolerance. Every time you laugh at what you should rebuke, every time you excuse what you should expose, every time you delay what you should destroy, you give her power. The Churail thrives on habit. She studies the patterns of your attention. She waits for consistency in your compromise. Because once she sees you getting comfortable with something that used to convict you, she knows her foundation is firm. You can't cast her out with words if your life still welcomes her presence. Authority doesn't come from speech. It comes from separation. And the Churail knows that as long as she has a place in your routine, your rebuke will have no power. Many people think deliverance is an event. It's not, it's a decision. You don't get free by shouting. You get free by shutting doors. You can't break what you keep borrowing from. The Churail hides in the corners of your comfort, in the habits you justify, in the company you refuse to leave, in the content you still consume. You can pray, you can declare, you can fast, but if your actions still entertain her, your authority is divided. You can't cast out a spirit that knows it still belongs. The Churail is not afraid of your voice. She's afraid of your change. You can scream at her all you want, but if your lifestyle still agrees with her nature, she won't move. Because deliverance is not about volume, it's about alignment. When your life aligns with purity, darkness loses its permission. When you stop entertaining what you once excused, the whisper loses its weight. But the Churail counts on your inconsistency. She waits for you to rebuke her in prayer, but re-invite her in practice. She knows that if she can keep you emotionally repentant, but behaviorally unchanged, she's safe. That's how the Churail survives, through emotional repentance. You cry, you confess, you promise you'll change, but then you go back to the same atmosphere that birthed the bondage. You want freedom without disconnection. You want deliverance without discipline. But freedom is not free, it costs your comfort. You can't keep petting what's trying to poison you. Every time you say, "It's not that deep," she digs deeper. Every time you say, "I'll stop later," she settles further, because she knows procrastination is her protection. The Churail doesn't need you to worship her. She just needs you to welcome her. And welcome doesn't always look like ritual, it looks like attention. It looks like replaying the same thought, returning to the same temptation, revisiting the same emotion that feeds her presence. That's why she feels comfortable. You've made her a part of your environment. She feels at home where there is no confrontation. The Churail doesn't need ownership of your life, just occupancy. She doesn't need to possess you. She just wants to remain tolerated. You can't cast her out while you're still negotiating with her. You can't say, "Leave," and then leave the door unlocked. Deliverance is not a command, it's a covenant. It means cutting ties, breaking cycles, changing habits, and closing every emotional window she crawls through. Because the Churail doesn't need authority when she has access. Once you close access, her authority ends. You can't keep watching, listening, and participating in the things that host her presence, and then wonder why she won't go. You can't keep feeding her and then ask heaven why she's still strong. Darkness doesn't die from denial, it dies from disconnection. Every atmosphere you keep unfiltered is an altar she feeds on. That's why she stays. Because she knows you'll pray at night but play in the morning. You'll declare freedom but still engage the same patterns that keep her alive. The Churail doesn't respond to noise, she responds to holiness. When your life becomes too pure for her to breathe, she has no choice but to leave. But as long as you keep giving her oxygen through compromise, she'll stay silent and comfortable, whispering from the corners you refuse to clean. You can't shout away what you still shelter. You can't rebuke what you still romance. You can't command out what you still crave. The Churail waits for your inconsistency. She knows that if she can keep you emotionally stirred, but spiritually unchanged, you'll never develop the strength to silence her. She feeds on hypocrisy, the gap between what you say and what you do. She knows that as long as that gap remains, she has ground. And the only way to end her influence is to remove her home. Stop feeding her through excuses. Stop entertaining her through emotions. Stop tolerating her through time.